In this session, we're going to be focusing on investment. We're going to try to get more practical than I think you hear at typical conferences. We're going to go into what's working, what's not, the different roles, the focuses of those roles, how different roles work together within the company, and where we see potential and challenges in the investment space. So I will let each of the other panelists introduce themselves. We have Ali Bryan from JLL, Hybe from APG, and Nunzio from Generali. Hybe, want to go first?
Yeah, test. Yes, my name is Hybe, part of the management team at APG Asset Management for the private market business. So we invest 150 billion in real estate, infrastructure and private equity. Responsible for top-down investment research and the AI implementation. And throughout my career, I've been very much focused on applying technology to improve decision-making. So build a REIT recommendation engine a long time ago, still in use, was the CEO of a global data analytics company, and now for 8 years at the APG. And very much looking forward to the next frontier of agents, automation, and intelligent AI systems.
Thank you. I'm Alexandra Bryant from JLL. I'm the global CEO of our valuation and advisory business. I've been at JLL for over 21 years, started my career on the capital market side as a broker, and moved into strategy roles where I spent a significant amount of my time really thinking about how we could leverage all of the proprietary data that JLL has for the best of both our people as well as our clients. And really looking forward to the conversation.
Hello, good morning everybody. Nunzio Laurenziello, Generali Real Estate. I am the CEO of the asset management company, so the regulated entity belonging to Generali. We manage 16 billion of real estate equity and debt. I joined Generali in 2018 to set up the debt platform, and before Generali I was involved in the investment banking side. So we are in this big transformation in the Generali world. So we are an asset management company belonging to an insurance company, and so it's a very important moment, and it's a big challenge for a company like us to enter in this new era, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel.
All right, thank you. So I want to start, give us a foundation. I'm assuming that there's so much conversation around technology and AI specifically because there's a gap between the potential and what's being done. So how do we get from where we are to where we want to be, where we think we can be? Where would you, or how big would each of you say that gap is in your specific roles? You do different things. That gap between where we are and where we want to be in both the development and the integration of technology into your workflows. Right?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would also like to say, I think, especially looking at institutional real estate investments, a lot of progress over the past 20 years has been made. If I think back 20 years ago, we now integrate a lot more data in decision making, and we report much more. Though over the past, especially over the past 3 years, the potential has grown so much with these new technologies that indeed the gap between the current AI implementation and potential, is very significant. I think there's so much upside and so many exciting development and things to be done. And I see a very big gap. So the direction of travel is very clear.
Yeah, I mean, I would say from a JLL lens, and particularly looking at the broader capital market space, which includes our investment sales, our debt advisory business, our loan servicing business, and the valuation business. We started our technology and data journey in 2017. So I do think we've made a good amount of progress, and we were talking about this before we started, where we have a single source of truth. We have 5,000 real estate professionals working on a single platform. We have a data lake, if you will, and I always liked the concept of thinking about data sitting in a lake somewhere, where we have $7 trillion of bid data that we have collected, and we collect through the processes that we are running. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 5+ years looking at how to standardize processes, how to really focus on that data aggregation play. And so I think there is still a gap, but we've done a lot of the hard work to get there. I think the challenging part now is with all of the advancements in AI and things, the gap seems to, every time you think you narrow the gap a little bit, it quickly gets wider, which I think is both the opportunity as well as the challenge.
There's a really good talk between Raj Singh and Christian Ulbricht at a conference a few years ago, and I loved it because Christian Ulbricht was very blunt and very candid and said, this is a much harder process than I thought it was. We've spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and it was way harder than we thought. And I learned a lot about the process that was humbling about how to go through. So it's when you have these companies that have put in the money and the time, you hear different sort of lessons that come out of that.
Completely, and I think one of the main lessons that we learned was it's so much less about what technology you have and so much more about the people and the change management piece and getting people to understand the journey that you're on and why it is valuable to move from, I have my spreadsheet and my black book, to working in a different way. And that is, I think, a lot of what Christian references in the journey, and what we learned is that you've got to focus on the people side of it as well. It's not just about the technology.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Nanzio.
I fully agree with Alexandra about the fact that we really don't know if the gap is wide or not. So this is the point. Putting it into the perspective of an asset manager that has to sell product on the market and set up new product. The point was, before generative AI and before agent, the gap between technology and new product was measurable and also a strategic decision of the company. Now the situation is quite different because we have generative AI, we have agent, and so we have to think about that the process can be also executed by agent. So we really don't know if the gap will be wider in the future because we really don't know the potential of the technology. So my point is that we have to work in a very open way in order to understand which will be the new limits in order to reduce as much as possible the gap. But for the moment, I see uncertainty in the gap.
Yeah, I think, Ali, it's something that we recognize a lot is that the world is changing much faster than real estate is changing. And even though we put in a lot of work and a lot of effort to make improvements, we're still falling behind because everything outside of that is moving faster than what we are. So given that, do you think that there are differences in the types of applications that are being developed and integrated, the things you see successfully versus unsuccessfully? There's a very big difference between automation and efficiency tasks versus how do we build things that help us do our job better? Do you see a difference in that? I tend to see the operational and the efficiency as getting much more focus and much more attention than the more strategic applications. In your organizations, where would you say that lands? Ali?
Yeah, no, I would say for us, we have tried, I think you have to be intentional and try hard to focus on both. It is very easy just to look at low-hanging fruit from an operational efficiency perspective. And in a sense, that gives people something back immediately. So, you want the quick wins. I think we have tried to be intentional and also focusing on the strategic side of it. So where do we think there's disruptors? You mentioned Raj Singh. For those of you in the audience who don't know, he leads JLL Spark, which is our corporate venture capitalist group that focuses on prop tech. And what that's enabled us to do is identify areas of disruption or really have a pulse on what's happening in that prop tech space and participate in it in a slightly different way. So, I think you have to try to do both, and it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier to identify operational efficiencies. I think it's actually harder to execute that in some ways. Sometimes looking at what are the new shiny things coming up feels a little bit easier.
shiny object syndrome. It's very easy to start chasing things, and one of the things you say is that you have to ask the hard question of, is this actually going to be valuable to the company? We've had many companies call and say, we would like to develop AI, and we say, for what? And their answer is, oh, I don't know. We don't know, but our chief executive said that we need AI. Well, understanding what it is that you're doing. But it's also, as your organizations get more complex, those problems get more complex, the solutions get more complex. Even automation and efficiency for complex problems is not a simplistic solution that you have to develop. So we run into that problem. Hybe?
Yeah, if I look at applications that are being pursued, then I think especially everything that is where the outcome is measurable, there it's easier to make the investment case in terms of resources required. And I would also say, especially with the latest wave of technology, Gen AI, the typical use case that I see also within our company is a chatbot on top of your internal documentation or on top of your internal structured data. I think that is very accessible, is really like, I would say, low-hanging fruit. But after that come sometimes more complex workflows that need to be automated, where the outcomes are a bit more uncertain, the upfront investment is higher, so that takes a while. And I also would like to mention here that actually some applications are building blocks for other applications. So having built that chatbot on top of your own internal data will facilitate the next use case that is maybe a bit more complex with an agent and a multi-step analysis, but that leverages the building blocks that you already built for earlier applications.
Yeah, we see often in companies, say we built a chatbot, and then they step back and say, oh, that's it. That was our goal, but we're not getting a lot of value out of that. Because that needs to be used in something else and getting bigger and bigger applications. So Nunzio, in your role as CEO, you look at all of these potentials and all the possibilities and all the options for you can develop. Costanza Balboni, your head of data science, was here last year. She's very spirited, I will say, and lots of opinions, very good at what she does. So how do you look at it within your organization as what you prioritize and where you see the biggest opportunities? Are those operational, those efficiency tasks, or are those, let's make better decisions as an organization?
Yeah, there are two different things. So obviously on the operational side, the automation now is a must-have. So for sure we have the operational side, but we want to see it also on another angle. So for example, on the valuation, on the market research, the public market and the private market are really different, because on the public market we have many mathematical models, many more information available. On the private market, until today, the information was not so clear, the market was not so transparent. Now, thanks to the AI, to the generative AI, you can have ton of information from website, from reports from the brokers. So you can put together this information very quickly, and you can have immediate access to a bunch of information that can allow you to analyze much more the situation and becoming more close to the public market. So this is one of the challenges that we have, because on the real estate world, we are very far, because we have usually valuation every quarter, every half a year, every year. And so sometimes we are completely disconnected from the fundamentals. Now, in my opinion, this is a big change in the paradigm also on the private market, and this is also the reason why we have to change so quickly as asset manager, because obviously this is the big challenge for us, not only on the operational side, being more efficient, that is something that is for sure for granted, but the other point is being more aligned to the time to market. So this is something that the generative AI and the agent can for sure help with.
So it's more about how my next question was going to be, how do you prioritize? There's so many ideas and so many options, and so many things that need to get done. How do you prioritize which ones to do? And as Hybe said, this is a challenge that we deal with often, is that the things that are often quick to develop are not the things that are going to be the most beneficial over the long term. But building a foundation doesn't provide much value over the short term, but it is the thing that's going to lead to the best long-term value. And I feel like there's always that struggle there. So how do you balance those two outcomes, and when you make decisions, and how you allocate a finite set of resources?
Yeah, so for sure, the allocation of resources is a big issue, for sure. And the first point, and probably Costanza also last year spoke about that on our side, are data. So we are speaking about data since 2020, so about the big data. But what we are doing is creating a data lake. So all the data of the company are in the same space with a single and unique view from everybody. So for sure, our foundation in order to be to build the future of AI, generative AI, and agents are data in the company. So for sure, we are prioritizing the data collection and obviously the data lake. On the other side, we are going to prioritize the needs of the customer. So for sure, the human being is important on having the conversation with the customer, but putting together the data, analyzing the data on a different way, it's also important on our side. So, for example, until some years ago, we used to have asset managers on the ground, single people on the ground, and when we have to do an investment, we used to call them to have their view. And this is one of the priority. But there is also another side of the coin. So we are trying to analyze macro data on the single area or small area. For example, we want to transform an office building from an office building to an hotel. So ideally, what we are doing is analyzing the demography, the number of hotels there are around, the booking reference around, the number of schools that you have around, in order to select which would be the best hotel that we want to set there. So this is a complete change of paradigm, and we are using big data in order to define which kind of hotel we want to which kind of hotel we want to set up there. So this is something completely different respect to the way of working that we had in the past.
Yeah. So you're on the other side of that. You're building these. So the company comes to you and says, we need some kind of application. We need a solution to this problem. How do you prioritize, and how do you give feedback about what should be prioritized based on your capabilities? What can be done technically? Your recommendations about saying, okay, what you're asking for and what you're providing in terms of funding and resources is not sufficient to solve that problem. How do you prioritize each of those applications, and how do you argue back and forth within the company to make sure that you're taking on things that you can be successful in developing?
Yeah, well, very important is expectation management. For example, in our setting, we make investment proposals regarding indirect real estate, regarding real estate vehicles. So we write an investment memo. So if you ask people, what do you want? Well, like an investment memo generator. Yeah, that's a great use case, but that actually, if you start thinking what is required to build that, that builds on top of so many elements that have to be built first. For example, as part of each investment, we assess the ESG profile of a potential investment. But just like even partly automating the ESG assessment of an investment proposal already requires a lot of alignment on methodology.
It's a whole separate model that has to be developed.
Exactly. So it all like so you have to, in terms of prioritization, like don't start with we don't start with like generating an investment proposal. No, we start with one of the building blocks, and managing expectations is very important.
We often get asked by companies, say, can you build us a prototype of a deep learning model? And if it works, then we'll fund the data collection and all the development. And I used to say no and try to explain. And I've gotten to a point where I just say, absolutely, I can do that. As soon as you build me a 20-story building, but I want you to build the 20th floor first. And if I like it, then I'll give you the funding for the foundation and the previous 19 floors. And they look at me like I'm a complete idiot. And it's, of course, an idiotic thing to propose, but that's essentially what's being asked. For these big outcomes, I want this big outcome, but not an understanding of the foundation that needs to be developed and what it takes to develop that foundation. You kind of said in the middle of that, of trying to take these expectations from clients and then bring them internally and try to get solutions developed. How do you manage that go-between to set expectations, but also obviously push to get as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost boring to say, but it really is all about the data. And so I think, the art of the possible is amazing if you really think about what truly is possible with where we are today with technology and AI. But if you don't have the right foundational data piece, then you have a lot of limitations. So the first thing we do when we talk to clients about what they want to do is, okay, let's talk about what we can either bring to the table from a data perspective or what you have. And again, I think just to go back to our journey, I do think we put a lot of investment in that foundational piece, which does give us a little bit of a leg up, I suppose, on actually being able to deliver data-driven insights to clients now. And so I think it's a little bit of a mix between what can we bring to the table as the service provider and how can we mix that with what our clients are doing. And one of the things we were talking about outside is it's really great when you can find a client who has that same vision, because then you can do a little bit of co-creation together. And I think that's where it starts to get really powerful if you're willing to go on that journey. I think the hardest space, especially in the largely institutional space, is you can't fail with, it's at the core of a service provider that you can't fail with clients. But we're in uncharted territory in a lot of ways here. So when we do find someone we can do something with, I think that's where you can really start to unlock some really interesting ideas and get a better understanding of what truly is the art of the possible.
Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, wrote a book called The Technological Republic. And it's a good book, but there's one line or one paragraph in there where he says, software is binary. It works or it doesn't work. When you have people, you're going back and forth, there's a spectrum of quality there. But if you're developing software, it works or it doesn't work. And there's often a big hurdle to get over to get that stuff to work. So you've all spent a long time now in this process and going through this transitional phase from traditional legacy real estate companies to trying to become more data-driven, more advanced, more technologically efficient. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you have faced thus far? And what are the biggest lessons learned that are different than what you expected when you started the process? I'd start.
In general, I think the biggest challenge thus far has been the alignment of the business process with the data and with the technology. As an example, for making investment decisions, we calculate an expected return. Well, there are many ways how you can calculate an expected return, and they're all good, but it's very difficult if that way of calculation is not standardized to facilitate that process, for example, with well-substantiated rental growth assumption. Model-wise. So the big challenge is first to harmonize these business processes, to standardize these, and that that always took the most time. And how we have addressed that is by embedding technologists within the investment team. So if you look, we have 200 investment professionals investing in real estate, private equity, and real estate vehicles, infrastructure vehicles, sorry. And roughly 10% of them are certified data engineers. So you see really like the mix in the front office with technologists and the more traditional skill sets.
Working with real estate data is not a non-trivial task. It's a hard thing to do. What lessons would you say you've taken away from this that have changed your approach from when you started to how you approach it now?
Well, when I started, I thought that bring the tools to the investment professionals, and they will start exploring them themselves, and they will build them out themselves, and like the low-code, no-code wave. I thought, well, if we just introduce low-code, no-code to the average investment professional, they will pick it up. No.
How'd that work out?
No, they did not. So yeah, you still have to have to a degree specialized people within the investment teams for that. Yeah.
And then from the top down, what have been your challenges and the lessons that you've learned as leading?
For sure, we have the same issue because obviously we have 100 professional, very skilled on a traditional way of working, and we hired some years ago data scientists. So the crash of the two culture was visible in the company. So at the beginning was completely a disaster. So just to be transparent, completely a disaster. So what we have done, we try to organize a sort of challenge in the company, asking people to propose or to share tasks that are, how we can say, that can manage through AI. So we receive many feedback from the company, and we try to solve the single piece. Okay, so for example, when the people has to analyze the lease agreement, we have a standard, so it's possible to have the AI that analyze the main topics of a lease agreement, and we will receive a small report, so you can have quickly all the information about the lease agreement or about a contract and so on and so forth. But after we realized that there are only episodes. So we have 100 of episodes, but we cannot change the company with 100 of episodes. So now the activity between investment team and digitalization and AI team is more smoother. But what we are doing, we are reshaping completely the process of the company, embedding in the process the AI. So you cannot complete a task without the AI. So the task are on the investment professional, are not on the AI or digital team, are on the investment professional, and they are forced to do AI, to use AI in order to complete the task. And this is, in my opinion, the only way to embed AI in the company.
Ali, what have been your challenges? I feel like you get sandwiched in the middle often on the two sides. What have been the challenges with that process, and how do you approach it differently now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, what we have as an asset ourselves is people. And so what we learned along the way was the need to get people understanding the vision, understanding the reason. If you're going to ask people to do something different, you have to have a good answer as to why, because they say, why do I need to do this different? I've been doing it the same way for whatever it is, 30, 20, 10 years. So I think as soon as we figured that part out and could really get them to understand this is the benefit to our clients first and foremost, because that's what we all get up every day for, and then this is what it means. I think it was much easier to get people along that journey. So really that change management piece and making sure that everyone was clear why we were going on this journey and vision and what it was going to mean for them.
I have a friend who says technology problems are first people problems. And if you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter how advanced the tool is, it's not going to work.
And I would say in addition, like a challenge, a very real challenge, especially in the beginning, was that the perception of the value of the activities. So in a group of investment professionals, the highest status activities are the traditional investment activities. So if somebody starts automating their own work and starts using like some kind of programming language outside of Excel, well, the person was already a bit worried. Am I going to be seen as support? As a support, am I going to be as an enabling function? Am I going to be lower in the company hierarchy? Because traditionally, data technology were enablement functions for investment professionals. But I truly believe that a very good embedded technologist within the investment team adds so much value. So we spent, I put in a lot of political capital to ensure that the embedded technologists are on an equal foot with the traditional investment professionals. Otherwise, you also don't get the best talent, and you really need the best talent for AI implementation.
When we talk about developing, we think about developing technology, now with the LLMs and Gen AI, that has become an easier process. And I feel like people think that it's now magic. I can just type something in and I get solutions to every problem that I ever wanted. And it doesn't work that way. When I've seen people that have developed really good applications or examples of people, somebody said, oh, this person built this or this person built that, and I look at them, that person has typically been coding for 10 or 20 years. They have a background in developing software, so they know how to go through that process. People often think it's magic rather than having that experience. Even with newer tools, you still have to have that background. What would you say, now trying to push the technology in, what would you say are the biggest misconceptions that people have, and how do they need to address those misconceptions to be more realistic about what can be done and what they ask for of you?
Yeah, I think, well, one misconception is that, for example, very specifically to Gen AI, is that Gen AI can generate something that looks very much like an investment proposal because it also has many words and also has like the same terms in it. But the quality of such an investment proposal, to assess that like to get from to get an investment proposal that is good enough, that hurdle is really very high and requires a lot of investments in standards, in methodology, in underlying infrastructure. And I think that's a misperception where like things generated with Gen AI typically look good very quickly, like it's easy to demo them, but to really get something, let's say, production ready in a high stake environment, yeah, that's a very different ballgame.
Real estate is a very high cost, and I see these models often that people say, I built a model. Like, okay, but is that model good enough to use? And there are different cases. If I build a model that makes book recommendations on Amazon based on something I just searched and it's 60% accurate, that's pretty good. If I develop something that diagnoses a fatal disease or values real estate at a 60% accuracy rate, that's not good enough. So I can produce something that puts something out, but that doesn't mean that it's good enough to solve those problems. Ali, when you're talking to clients and they say, we want a certain outcome or we want a certain kind of application, something to help us do what we do, and you have to be that go-between, how do you manage that communication between the two sides so that you set expectations about what can be done effectively? What JLL does it is a very high level of quality and sophistication. It's not simplistic, non-trivial real estate. And I don't work for JLL, just say. But when you produce something and you put out some kind of product or service, you need to make sure that it's of high quality. So how do you manage those expectations from what people are asking for versus what can actually be produced for them?
Yeah, I think it's the combination, and look, our strategy is relatively clear on this. It's the combination of that data-driven insights and intelligence with the people, and I don't think we're going to go away from that. Real estate isn't equities. You know, the number of consistent data points that you get on the equity side is probably something we may never get to from a real estate perspective with that same level of, you know, daily data points. And I think that that's not a bad thing. Context matters. Real estate is inherently local. So I think that it's really more about how do you match that data piece and what the art of the possible is with AI with the right subject matter expertise, with the right people, and that combination is what makes it truly powerful, not one or the other. And I think that's how we try to bridge the gap with clients, is to show that, our objective is to put the best data and intelligence in the hands of our best people to deliver that kind of combined services to clients.
And in my opinion, there is also another point, because one of the, how we can say, promise, or one of the misrepresentation for the AI, generative AI and agent is, okay, with the AI you can replace tons of people and you can reduce the fee as minimum as asset manager. So this is something that is really a shortcut, in my opinion, and is not completely aligned to the reality. So as we said before, we are identify and we are trying to understand the gap, and we are trying to understand what we can really do for the real estate market with generative AI and agent. For sure, the paradigm is going to change, but saying that we can replace 100% humans and we can reduce the fees of 50% is not true. So we do not have the magic receipt. So it's really important to understand that for sure with these transformation, we have to embrace this transformation because we need it and we can do better and better, but it's so early to say that we can reduce the fees of 50% and we can replace 100% of the people also for strategic decision. So it's important to be, how we can say, transparent and clear on these also. This is for Generali, but probably for all the big organizations. We are doing a massive effort and we want to embrace this challenge, but the magic receipt is not already there.
I saw a chart from Anthropic that came out a few days ago, and it said, have you seen that? That 94% of business and finance roles can be automated. I don't agree with that. It also said something like 23 or 28% of business and finance roles have already been automated, and I think that is extremely high as well. I think those numbers are, I don't agree with those numbers. I don't know what they're looking at or the methodology, but I don't feel that they're accurate from what I've seen, especially not in real estate.
No, I think first of all, there's a lot of implementation frictions, which will mean that the implementation of AI will take a lot longer than what is already technically possible today. But also, I think what is underestimated is, let's say, the demand elasticity. So LLMs in itself create like applications with LLMs that we can now think of. They were 3 years ago unthinkable. So it creates its whole new demand. Which will soon be the new market standard practice. So I think this new technology will also create a lot of new demand for companies to fulfill.
All right, so I want to get a little challenging here for a minute. I told you all I would. You all have different roles in the organization, and you work with similar roles within your own organization. What advice would you give to the other roles in terms of what they can do better to help you do your job better? What needs to change? What do they need to learn, do more of, more less of, so that you can be more effective in what you do? Ali, I'll start that with you.
Well, I'd maybe turn to you. I think one of the things we learned early on, and I think we rectified it with our approach, but we had a big gap between the business and technology, people who were doing kind of research and data analytics and how we needed to get to where we needed to get to. So, I think having people now who understand what real estate actually is within our technology group is hugely helpful, because I think there were a lot of misperceptions on both sides in terms of how to work together, what to do, and we set up an innovation team, which is a combination of real estate professionals and data scientists, quantum physicists who have been in real estate, and I think that combination has been what's truly powerful to us. But we had a lot of teething problems initially when I think, particularly on technology and data side, there was a lot of misperception around what real estate even was.
Did you feel that the tech people had a bit of an attitude when it came to real estate?
We hired a lot of people in Silicon Valley, especially.
So that's a yes.
Especially who came from a consumer background, and I think we had to do a lot of education around why consumer-facing technology products are very different than when you are in a B2B institutional environment. That's a very corporate yes, I think.
You are. That's a very political answer. So, Haib, you kind of sit in the middle as well. You have people like Ali in your organization coming and saying, our clients, our product, we need certain applications, and then you have leadership that allows you to do what you do. What advice would you give to them to allow you to do what you do better?
Yeah. Well, I think to Nuno, I think the key is to bring technology and investment roles very close together and to very much promote also, let's say, the hybrid skill set. So the deep domain knowledge together with data and technology skills. To bring that as close as possible, I think that in general works very well, and that also in aligning business processes, data, and technology, the shorter the lines, the shorter the escalation lines are, the faster things can be organized. So I think that would be very helpful.
Hybrid skills is, in my opinion, key for in this environment. So we are trying to, especially on the young generation, to hire people with such kind of skills, with an hybrid set of skills, because obviously, as I mentioned before, we are embedded into the process of the organization, AI, generative AI, and hopefully agent. So the hybrid skill set will be, how we can say, a must-have for the future. I have another point for Ale. So because obviously we are working massively with advisors. So because obviously these are very, very helpful on many things, on valuation, on research, and many other things. So one of the points for the future for the advisor is understand the scheme of each company. So for us, it's becoming key that the data that the advisor will provide us are provided in a specific way. So it's also a matter of mutual knowledge of the process and procedure of the company that the advisor is advising, in order to understand which will be the data set and how they can transfer this data to the client. So this would be, in our opinion, one of the key elements. We are struggling with this. So we are struggling with receiving a certain set of data with a certain, how we can say, quality from different advisors, and it will be something that will be beneficiary for everybody.
So in your position, you have to make those decisions about resource allocation, about which projects go through, and there's a lot of inputs, a lot of factors you have to consider. Some of them are very, or most of them probably are very specific to Generali. What would you like everyone else to know about why you make the decisions that you make? What do you factor into those decisions? And I might say, well, I need $20 million to build something out, and you say, well, here's $5 million. What are those considerations? What are those factors that you use to make that decision about how those resources get allocated and what the strategic direction of the company is?
Okay, it's not an easy question. So I have some minutes to reply. So for sure, we are mixing the traditional way of working with the new way of working. So any single decision, any single investment decision has two different elements. For example, we have to decide the portfolio rotation of our big fund that is an office fund in Europe. So we have to define which will be the portfolio rotation, which asset we want to sell and which asset we want to buy. So usually we receive the feedback from the people on the ground and we decide the portfolio rotation. Now the situation is changed. So we receive the feedback from the colleagues all around Europe, but on the other hand, we develop an AI instrument that will allow us to identify main capital or main area where we have to invest or we have to divest because of the dynamics, the demographic dynamics, for example, is not going well. So we are putting together the two elements in order to, how we can say, understand which will be the future of the product. And this is for sure one of the elements. In terms of priority, for sure for the entire company, what we are doing is simplifying the product offer and simplifying the processes. So we don't want to have 10 products, 12 products, many products. We want to have a limited number of products that are very simple to understand also for the clients. So we are going in a direction of a simplification, not because we don't want to manage the complexity, because obviously living in a world where you are a regulated entity under the, how we can say, big carpet of an insurance company, obviously the complexity is a day-by-day activity, but we want to simplify the product and the process in order to be more effective for the clients. So for sure, the magic word now is the simplification.
All right, good. I'll switch that around a little bit. What advice do you think the other roles would give to you about what they need from you to do their jobs better? Ali, I'll start that one with you.
Ooh. I think being much more clear with the strategy and the vision. What are we trying to do long term? And I think if you have that, then a lot of your decisions can anchor off of where you're trying to go and what your North Star is.
Okay. Anzio?
So,
you work with Costanza, so I know that she's given you some of that feedback already. Perhaps you just share that.
Yeah, so the feedback for sure is trying to, we can say before, trying to simplify. So the simplification would be key for humans and also for the agent. So in my opinion, the simplification is one of the big points. And the other point is considering that the AI is something that you can train in the day by day. So we have to push the people to understand how they can train the AI. So this is something that we really need in all the companies, in my opinion, because we have to understand that, as you mentioned before, the investment people used to say, okay, we need this response, we need this response now, so it is work or it doesn't work. No, this is not the way of working. The way of working is the AI needs to be trained, and at the really end you get the real answer. So this is the point. And the last point, in my opinion, is also related to the behavior of each of us, because we spoke before the panel with Ali about the fact that especially in Europe, we used to think about, analyze the risk, and only after put together the solution and execute. Now, with the AI, the generative AI, and with the agent, we have to go in execution and trying to understand if it works or not in more faster way. So this is, in my opinion, the big point that we have right now. So we used to analyze the things, put together the things, ask the risk department if it's okay or not, and so after we will put it into execution, but we do not have so much time because the technology is so fast. So we have to put it in production as soon as possible in order to understand if it works or not.
I would say that's one learning that many of my colleagues that we did hire from Silicon Valley tried to teach us, is that you've got to figure out how to fail quickly and pivot. much more than we are comfortable, I think, as real estate professionals doing.
I think that's one of the reasons that things are changing faster than we are changing things and falling behind. Hybe, from your perspective, I know it's always do more with less, but
Yeah.
what do they need to know so that, or what advice do you think they would give you?
Sorry, before I go into that, one point to add to the idea that we should fail faster. I was also thinking, like, how can we accomplish that? And I believe it's also very much a matter of alignment, internal alignment, like ensuring that the departments, like for example the IT department or the risk department, if you have any, that they are aligned with the business, because in sometimes these departments, well, they can only gain by saying no, because if they say yes and it was a real risk, then they have a problem. And if they say no, they will never have a problem. So I feel very much like internal alignment, and to organize this internal alignment is really a key to unlocking a lot of value. Also in terms of, if you think, I truly believe in these embedded technologies, but also there's an alignment, there's some tension of alignment between the IT department, who used to be the owner of all work, all technological work, and the business. So are you going to move budget from the IT department to the investment department? Yeah, there are a lot of challenges there that only actually the CEO can overcome. So this was just a little.
I also feel that IT is not the same as analytics. Those are two very different roles, and some of those functions have to come out of the IT department, and there has to be a completely new set of capabilities that are there. So we're running out of time. We have about 9 minutes left, and I want one more question, then open it up to some questions from the audience. What advice would you give to people in the audience now that are thinking about going through this process, both at the executive level, higher levels of real estate organizations? What do they need to know? What are the things that they need to learn to be better at this process? And we have a lot of college students and young people as well. What advice would you give to young people as to how they can maximize where their career goes, given where they're starting now?
For sure, it's important to understand that this is both a top-down and bottom-up process within an organization. So it's not possible to receive only instruction from top, but it's also a mutual help in this, how we can say, a change of paradigm. The other point is that it's important to be curious, and it's important to try. So, because obviously in big organization like our organization, one of the mantra is, we did it for 10 years, 12 years in this way, why we have to change now? So probably we are embracing this big change, and in 2 years' time, there will be something else. So the real point is to give to the young people in the company the sense that this is a very important transformation, and we have to be there, and we have to receive from them information and input, so the executive team, the leadership team can also cascade which will be the priorities. But this is the reason why it's important to have hybrid skills.
Well, for an individual, indeed, get hands-on experience, experiment with, of course, approved corporate tooling, apply an LLM on a simple, small task to build intuition, but also very much like investigate and understand the problem, like do efforts to understand the problem very well. I think that for an individual and for an executive, yeah, also there, I think set very clear targets, but also look at your promotion criteria and put some forward-thinking people in leadership positions. It's okay to hire a data scientist, but if that data scientist is not in the room when important investment decisions are being made, yeah, then maybe the effect of this data scientist will be very limited. And so also be willing to promote forward-thinking people to important positions, even though they might not have the exact traditional background.
Ali?
I would echo everything that these two said, and kind of reiterate what I said before. I think having that clarity of vision as to where you want to get to, but being very agile on the way as to how you're going to get there, because things are changing and moving so quickly. And I do think that intellectual curiosity piece is so important for anyone, for student leaders, like really playing around with things and understanding what the art of the possible is and using it yourself in your kind of daily life.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Do we have the... Apparently she's not there. There was someone here, but they are not.
Better be a good question now. Morning. George Armitage from Oxford Economics. What would each of you individually say is the biggest opportunity for the real estate industry to help evolve with AI? Thinking big picture here.
Go ahead.
I guess from my perspective, I think it is to really think about how to unlock parts, whether it's areas of investment, whether it is, sectors that are more complex, really, I guess, leveling the playing field to an extent with some of that because of the level of data that may become available. We can make smarter, quicker decisions and can really think more about the diversification play in a way that maybe wasn't possible before.
Exactly what I mentioned before. So we are moving more versus the decision making on the liquid market. So we have to consider now that the situation is becoming like thanks to the technology, we are becoming more like the liquid world. So the decision making will be faster because we will have more information available thanks to the technology, and the market is becoming more transparent. So we are moving from a situation where we are like in an opaque world through a, how we can say, more transparent world like the liquid market. So the analysis are more related to data because the data will be available and transparent. This is my point.
And in addition, I think decisions can be better explainable, which also adds to the transparency, and in the end would add to the trust in the sector.
I think we have time for one more question, I believe.
Hello, my name is Dr. Heimnott Wachtmeister, and I am specialized in Swedish rental regulations. And one of the key issues that we have in the Swedish markets, but overall in the European market, is that data is very much highly regulated. So since all three of you are active globally, do you see the potential of the discussions helping you differently in different markets? Thank you.
So I fully agree with you. Also, in Generali Real Estate SGR, we are working in a highly regulated environment. And so we are working with institutions in order to understand how this sharing of data and information can unlock the potential of the real estate market all around Europe. This is always a balance, for sure, because we cannot avoid regulatory issues. But on the other hand, we see in the last 12 months the regulators all around Europe more open to consider possible solution. But we need to have an active role on this. So we have to make proposal because otherwise they are in the crystal tower, and they are waiting for something that will happen. So we, as Generali, we are making tons of proposals in order to allow this shift for the market. We are not yet there, but now the door is open with respect to the past.
There's mutual agreement to that answer. So we're good. All right, everyone, I thank you for coming. Our goal for today, I mentioned in the first session earlier this morning, but our goal for today was to have people who actually do this job on a day-to-day basis. Not people that are coming up, they're not content creators or speaking gurus or people that just come up with big ideas but no way to solve that, or no idea how those solutions would come to fruition. So we wanted to bring together people who do this job every day and can provide more of a blunt and practical assessment of what's happening, what the challenges are, what the potentials are, what needs to happen, and coming from people that have been doing this for 10 years or more, the lessons learned so that you all can go out there. If many companies that are starting this journey and at the beginning of it can avoid some of those mistakes and those failures and start to make progress more quickly. And I feel like we made a dent in that. There's a lot more that needs to be discussed than 1 hour can hold, but hopefully we made a dent and provided some information and context that you haven't heard before, or at least haven't heard at that level of detail. But thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the day.